Begin the current Daf and Septus Beruchas Daf Mem Aleph. We begin 6 lines down at the top of the Amud, 5 lines down at the top of the Amud, where we continue quickly from Daf Mem, just a review of some of the things we spoke about regarding, we would continue on the theme about Beruchas Hapas, making the bracha on bread. What's generally, if you speak between the bracha and the eating, that's considered hefsek, and you would have to make a new bracha. But certain things, if they're considered tzarich suda, like telling someone here, take a piece of the bread, or bring salt, or condiment, or go ahead and need the brand for the oxen because you can't eat before you feed your animals, that would not be considered hefsek for the bracha. And we said our bread is naki, is refined, so you don't need a salt, but we have it anyway. And we had different teachings from that Emor regarding how could a person totally relieve themselves and what type of foods. We went into a whole discussion regarding what's healthy, what's not healthy. We spoke about the halacha of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda said that by Yerakis, you don't make the general bracha, bar pri adam, you make mini dashayim, because Baruch Hashem yom every single day regarding its bracha, but we don't rule like that. Went to the halacha, then we had a new Mishnah regarding what happens if you make a mistake on the bracha. On a fruit of a tree, you make a bar pri adam, we said you're going to be yaitze, and that's actually the halacha, because like Rabbi Yehuda, who says the primary thing of a fruit tree is the ground, like we find by Bikurim that he says even if the tree dried up, you're going to bring and you're going to say the Parsha Bikurim. Let's say a vegetable, bar pri adam, you make a bar pri eitz, you're not going to fulfill your obligation. And what's the chiddush? Of course, it's like Rabbi Yehuda, who even though he holds chita is the eitz hadas, which that's something that grows from the ground, and still it's called a tree. That's the chiddush. But in halacha, we consider something a tree only if it grows from year to year and the fruits come back. Even if it looks like a tree, like a banana, we're not going to make certain fruits. We're going to make hadam, even though it's a fruit. So therefore, that's the chiddush we have to say, that if you're going to make even on like something like chita, a bar pri eitz, you're not going to fulfill your obligation. Shahakal, however, you will fulfill your obligation. But we had a machlekes if that's going to even include bread and wine. And that's not the same as the machlekes hanoim of when you say kamano pazu, because you could say that they're different. One at least mentioned the element of bread. So even though if you'll say generally by shahakal you won't fulfill your obligation, maybe if you say bread, then you'll fulfill your obligation. Or no, to the contrary, even if you say generally shahakal will be yaitz even by wine and bread, but if you make a bracha that the Rabbanan did not institute, that's not going to fulfill your obligation. And then we went to discussion, the same thing for Beruchas Hamazon, Baruch Rachmana Mar Dehai Pita. You will fulfill your first bracha of Beruchas Hamazon, even though it's a loose translation in a secular language. And then we continue with the next Mishnah regarding the bracha of shahakal, that things that don't grow from the ground are shahakal, things that are like, let's say, deteriorated, that are, let's say, moldy bread and wine that's spoiled already. So that's we had a machlekes, that's actually shahakal too. But then when things that are like min klala, by vinegar or noivleis, Rabbi Yehuda says you don't make a bracha at all because it's min klala. And we had a machlekes which we're going to discuss in our daf regarding what comes first. If you have a few different things in front of you, what do you make the bracha on? Min shiva, one of the shivas aminim, pomegranate, let's say, or chava. If you like that food better, you can make the bracha on the cashews. What's the halacha? The Gemara discussed regarding mushrooms that are very interesting, that they're gedule karka, they grow from the ground, but they don't nourish from the ground. So if we actually don't make adam, we actually make a shahakal. And then the Gemara had a discussion regarding what would noivleis. Noivleis in our Mishnah, everyone agrees is bishuli karma, sunburnt, so therefore it's a min klala, so that's where we have the machlekes in the Mishnah. The whole machlekes amiram, if it's sunburnt or windblown, is a Mishnah Masechtas Demai regarding what's called the kalin shabedmai, because they're not chashba types of things, therefore they're going to take off meiser. That's where they had machlekes regarding what are the noivlis over there. Some of the ideas we're going to speak about today in Beruchas Daf Mem Aleph. We're going to explain the halacha of the Mishnah that we just mentioned, that we have a machlekes, what's better to make a bracha on? Is it min shiva? If you have one of the shivas amin, do you make a bracha on that? Or do you make on what's chav? Now there's going to be a machlekes in that machlekes. A machlekes at Meram, where was the machlekes Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham? Was it only when the brachas are the same? But if they're different, then they're not going to have the machlekes. Or one Amar is going to say, no, the machlekes was even if the brachas are different. So if they're different, so then what's the difference? Who cares? You're going to make brachas on both. Ha'etz and adam are different brachas. So then we're going to get into discussion regarding what comes first. So that would be two different discussions. One is if, let's say, they're all the same bracha. So then, okay, which one should you make the bracha on? You could choose which one, and now it's going to exempt all the other things. Or no, even if you're going to make both brachas, which one comes first? As we're going to see a lot that regarding the shivas aminim, that you say that whichever one is early in the pasuk comes first, or actually the other interpretation who disagrees and says that no, is that the shivas aminim, we're going to go through it lengthy detail regarding it's actually for shiurim. We find that the Torah mentions different shiurim in all the different types of produce of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore that's why it says, but not regarding what comes first. Then we're going to have on Amud Beis a discussion regarding fruits that come into the meal, not because of the meal, meaning it's not there to be used together with the bread, but it comes in the middle of the meal, a three-way machlokes regarding what is the halacha. Do you make a bracha rishayna? Do you make a bracha achrayna? That's going to be three different opinions, and regarding other things that come into that, in different types of foods also, let's say meat and porridge and different things come in the meal, what is exempted with the bread, with the bracha rishona and the bracha achreina? So our shiur is sponsored by Kal Zach and Yecheskel Torah Anytime and Daf Achayim. We begin on 5 lines down from the top of the Yomid on Mem Aleph and Mem Aleph, where the Gemara continues to explain the halacha of our previous Mishnah on Mem Amud Beis, where we said, let's say someone has a lot of different species in front of him, a lot of different foods. You sit down to a meal, you're not washing, what are you going to make a bracha on? So on that, Ma'ula, he qualifies, although he had a machlekes in the Mishnah regarding do you say the shivas amina first or whatever you like better. So he says machlekes b'shabechasei and shavas. Says their machlekes in the Mishnah was if the brachas are the same. So for example, let's say you have in front of you, you're sitting down, you have an olive and you have an apple. Both of them are bracha b'rei pri'etz. Now you're coming to make the b'rei pri'etz, which is going to fulfill the obligation of both of them. That's where we had the machlekes, which is Rabbi Yehuda Savi he held, and actually this has we rule min shiva adif. What's better is you take the shivas aminim. So you're going to make the bracha. If you sit down for breakfast today to an olive and the apple, you would make a bracha on the olive because the min shiva, the shivas aminim is better, and it's one of the shivas aminim. Now Rabban Savi they disagree. They say no min chavav adif. The one that's dear to the person, that's better. Whichever one you want to, because the Mishnah when it says the one that is chaviv on him, it sounds like. So whatever one you want to choose, that's the one you're going to make the bracha on the apple if you want to. That's what the machlekes was in the Mishnah. Aval, but says ula b'she'ein b'chesein shabbos. Let's say the brachas are not the same. 2 different types of brachas. You're sitting down. One's a b'rei pri'etz, one's a b'rei pri'adama. So then says ula direi hakol, and this is actually the halacha. Everyone's going to agree over here that since one bracha is not exempting the other one, so there's no machlekes over here. Mevarach al zeh, you make a bracha on one, v'chazim mevarach al zeh, and then you go make a bracha on the other one, whichever one you want to. So therefore, there's no machlekes. Now Rashi points out, although we said in the previous daf of Mem and Aleph that if you make a bracha on a fruit of a tree, a b'rei pri'adama, you're going to fulfill your obligation. So how could you say you make a bracha on one and then on the other one? What do you mean? If you're going to make the bracha on the hadama first, that's going to exempt the obligation of the b'rei pri'etz. And that says Rashi, and Taisa says also, no, that's only when it's one thing that's in front of you and you made a mistake and you made on a fruit of a tree, you made a b'rei pri'adama, then you can fulfill your obligation. But when you have in front of you a radish, and you have an olive, where one is a hadama, a radish, and you make a hadama, you have not fulfilled your obligation on the olive. You would have to make a bracha, and that's actually the halacha, a b'rei pri'etz on the olive. So there it says, again, machlekes in our Mishnah is only, as we wrote over here, if the brachas are the same. If the brachas are different, okay, so then chayzim avarach. There's no machlekes. Everyone agrees. You'll make a bracha on one, make a bracha on one, whichever one you want to. There's no machlekes. However, the Gemara asks on Ula from the following brisa. The brisa says, this case, when the brachas are different, you're sitting down on a table and you have in front of you a radish, which is a b'rei pri'adama, and you have an olive, which is a b'rei pri'etz. Says the brisa, mavarach al tznoin. So you know what you're supposed to do? Make a bracha on the radish, upaites azayis, and you'll exempt the olive. Why? Because you can make one bracha. Someone actually asked this yesterday after the shiur. Says, what do you mean? You can make one bracha and take. Why do you have to make 2 brachas? Bracha she'ein tzricha. Make a bracha on the radish, which is hadama, and we said in hadama includes also a b'rei pri'etz. So you see that it's not true. It's not like that everyone agrees when they're different brachas, you make a bracha one then the other. You see, like the brisa says, you'll make the bracha on the radish and you'll exempt the olive, because b'rei pri'adama is including also fruit that grow on the tree. Says Gemara, now hachmai skin. What are we talking about over here? Is kishatznoin ikar. We're talking about where the primary is the radish. Meaning, why am I sitting down to eat? I'm sitting down because I want to eat a radish. So why am I eating an olive? Because the radish is so sharp. I'm only eating the olive to counteract the sharpness of the radish. So that makes the olive into what's called a tuffle, into a secondary. A Mishnah later on, the Mimdal and Aleph, it tells us a very important halacha in Hilchas Brachas. Whenever you have a primary and you have something secondary with it too, you make a bracha on the primary and you exempt the secondary. So no, the truth is, like Ula said, everyone agrees if you have 2 different brachas, you can make a bracha on both of them, so you could say whichever one you want to, because you're going to make the other bracha anyway, not exempting. Oh, so why does the brayta say you make a bracha on the radish and you don't make a bracha on the zayis? Not because it's included in the bracha, because hadama includes a 8. No, it's simply because I want to eat the radish. I'm only eating the olive to offset the sharpness of the radish. So therefore it's like a tuffle. A tuffle is included in the bracha up. So although let's say you would say zayis is more chashav, it's a 8, it's shivas aminim, it doesn't make a difference. You can make the bracha on the radish because that's the primary. Says the Gemara, if that's how you're interpreting the brisa, Ema Sefer, look at the end of this, at the brisa. Brisa says, Yehuda, he disagrees. He says, no, mavarch al hazayis. He says, no, make the bracha on the olive, shazayis mimin shiva, because the olive is one of the shivas aminim. Says the Gemara, what, lastly, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold on this mission that we just quoted him down and Aleph. Kol shu ikav mitzvela. If you have a primary thing, which is the main thing you're coming to eat, and if it is something secondary, the halach is mavarch al ik. You make a bracha on the primary, which we just said is the radish, upoites hatvela, and that exempts the secondary. How could he say you make a bracha on the olive? It's not the ikar. Says the Gemara Bechita, maybe you're going to say, yeah, Hachanami, you're right. The Leslie, he disagrees with that Mishnah, and he holds you don't make the bracha on the Iker. You'll make on the Shabbos Aminim. But Tanur, you learn the Brisa not like that. Behuda, who we're talking about, he says, Imach Matznain Bahazayis, if because of the radish, that's why you're eating the olive. Mevarach al tznain, he clearly agrees to the halacha we were saying it with the Brisa saying, you make a bracha on the radish, you pay tezayis and exempt tezayis. So if you're saying that's the case of the Brisa, how could he say you make the bracha on the olive? Says the Gemara, no. The truth is like we said before, yes, but tznain ikar skin, we're talking about where the primary is the radish. You want to eat the radish, it's the ikar. So B'chi Plig Rabban Rabbi Yehuda. So how does Rabbi Yehuda disagree with Rabban in the Seifa and say that no, you make a bracha on the olive? Says the Gemara, B'milsa Achriti Pligi. There's something else. It's a different case over here. There's words missing in the Brisa. This is what the Brisa is supposed to say. The Reish is like we said before. If you had in front of you a radish and an olive, and again the primary is the radish. So like we said, everyone agrees to what Ula was saying, that the Brisa here is different. You make a bracha on the radish simply because it's the ikar and it's going to exempt the olive. Now, but when did we say this? Like we were explaining kishat tznain ikar when the primary is the radish. So then the olive is just the secondary. Aval but ein hatznain ikar, if the radish is not primary, yeah, divrei hakol, then everyone say like Ula mavarach hazeh v'chayzim mavarach hazeh, that you would make a bracha on one and then you make a bracha on the other one. Because here there's no machlekes tanoim. Everyone agrees that it's only when you're saying one bracha and you're going to exempt the other one. That's your machlekes should be in the Mishnah. But when they're different brachas, like Ula, you'll make a bracha on one the other. Now there's a seifa that there are words missing over here in this brayso. V'shnei min ba'alma. Now in general, when you have two different types, like you have an olive and you have an apple, sheberchasein Shabbos, but their brachas are the same. Both of them are by pre-aids, but one of them is from the Shabbos Aminim. That's where they have the machlekes in this brayso, which is essentially the same machlekes we have them in the Mishnah, which is mevarach al eizim and shiur. Tanna Kama says, okay, you could make whichever one you want to, because that's chaviv, that's the one that you like better. Yehuda disagrees. He says, and this actually, as we rule, like we said, mevarach al azayis, no, you make the bracha on the olive, shazayis min shiv, because it's one of the Shabbos Aminim. So therefore, there is no machlekes in the case of when the brachas are different. Ula said the whole machlekes in our Mishnah was when it's the same bracha. And the same bracha, which one do you make the bracha on? Rabbi Yehuda says on the Shabbos Aminim, and the Chacham said, no, you make on whichever one you like better. But when they're different brachas, it doesn't make a difference because you can make a bracha one and then the other. However, says the Gemara, but pligi barabam Rabbi Yitzchak nafka. This that we just said from Ula, that the machlekes is only when, as we wrote over here, when the brachas are the same. Now we're going to see that actually machlekes amiram if it is only when they're the same or even when the brachas are not the same. Charama one says like Ula. Machlekes b'shebechasein Shabbos. The machlekes was only when the brachas are the same, like we just explained before from Ula, which is Rabbi Yehuda. This is essentially a repetition from Ula. Rabbi Yehuda held min shiva adif. No, the better one is the Shabbos Aminim. For Rabban Sabri they held min chav adif. No, the one you like better is better. That's the one you make the bracha on. B'shem b'chasein Shabbos. If the brachas are not the same, divrei hakol. Everyone agrees. Mavarach hazeh. You make a bracha on this one. Mavarach hazeh. Make a bracha on that one. Doesn't make a difference. Which one? There's no which one. You're going to make both brachas anyway. So then it doesn't make a difference. But v'chadam, here's we have a new Amoira. One Amoira says, no, av b'shein b'chasein Shabbos. Even when the brachas are not the same, nami machlekes, we're still going to have a machlekes, which Gemara is going to explain what's the machlekes. Well, how could you say which one you're making bracha on both of them? So the Gemara asks it. The Gemara explains. Bishlam al-Madam, it's very well according to the one who says, like Ula, the first Amar Bishop B'chasein Shabbos, the machlekes was when the brachas are the same. That's why we have machlekes on Shabbat. That makes sense, like we said before. Question is, if you're making one bracha on both types, which one is the one that's more chashuv to make the bracha on? But al-Madam, according to the Amar that says B'shein B'chasein Shabbos pligi, that even when the brachas are different, then you have a machlekes. But my pligi, what's the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham? Here, you're not going to be exempting one with the other one. So what does that mean? What's the machlekes? You're going to make a bracha anyway on both. So what does that mean? Which one? There's no which one. You're making both brachas. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says lahaktim. It's because to say yes, you're making both brachas, but which one comes first? That's the machlekes. Which one? Do you say the chaviv comes first, or do you say the min shiva comes first? Because the Amar Rabbi Yisrael, some say it was Rabbi Yitzchak, that he says that this Amar is going based his interpretation on this teaching of Rabbi Yisrael. Kalamuktim b'pasik zeh, whatever comes first in this pasuk of the Shabbos Aminim, muktim lebracha is the first one you make the bracha. Like it says the pasuk in the Var. Says the famous pasuk, Eretz, the land of Israel is chita, has wheat, v'sa'ira, barley, v'gefen, and grapevine, v'te'ena, and a fig, v'rim, and a pomegranate, Eretz, zayis, shemen. It's a land of olive oil, v'dvash, and honey. So what we see is that the Torah is particular about an order. So Rabbi Yehuda that says you make the one on the Shabbos Aminim, he holds like Rabbi Yitzchak, that you see even in the Shabbos Aminim itself, you say that there's an order. So therefore, for sure, when one of them is not from the Shivas Aminim, which one's going to be first? You're going to make the one on the Shivas Aminim. The Rabbanan don't hold like Rabbi Yitzchak when you have something that's more dear to you, because the one that's dear to you is better. So therefore, yes, the machlekes could even be like we wrote over here from the other Amayra, even the brachas are not the same. What do you mean not the same? So you can make both brachas anyway? You're not to exempt. But which one comes first? That's what you see from even in the Shivas Aminim itself. But says the Gemara, Upliga, this teaching of Rabbi Yitzchak that says, whichever one is earlier in the pasuk of the Shivas Aminim. So let's say chita, you could eat. Let's say, and this is actually the halacha, if you have a wheat dish or a barley dish to eat, you're going to make the wheat dish first before the barley dish, because we say that whatever comes first earlier in the pasuk is telling you that it's earlier than for a bracha, because you see that he interprets that it's talking about the praise of Eretz Yisrael, that it has such chashuv of peiros, and therefore talking about the chashivas of the peiros. So that means whatever's earlier in the pasuk is more chashuva of a pri. Says the Gemara, that disagrees with Reb Chanan. Because Reb Chanan says, no, the pasuk is not coming to tell you the chashivas, the distinguishment of the fruits itself with its taste, to say that that's a chashuva pri. It's talking about the praise of Eretz Yisrael, that it has in it peiros, that the measurements of the Torah are contingent on. And if that's the case, the Torah was not particular about the order of the Shivas Aminim to say that this one comes first. No, in regards to the peiros themselves, they're all equal. So then why are we mentioning the Shivas Aminim in the pasuk? That's to tell you a different idea. The Reb Chanan says, Kal pasuk kuli, this whole pasuk, again, is not talking about the praise of the fruits, it's talking about the praise of Eretz Yisrael. The shiur in them, because talking about all the fruits of Eretz Yisrael, that the measurements in halacha are dependent on the size of the fruits. And now the Gemara goes through all the Shivas Aminim, describing how each one we find a halacha related to that pri itself. Chita, wheat, now we learn the Mishnah Masechtas Nagayim. Interesting, there's a pasuk that says in Vayikra Yudalad, it says V'habal abayis. Whoever comes into a house that has a negav tzaras, says Yitma the arb, he's going to be tummy until the evening. Now the thing is, there's another pasuk that says, because that pasuk doesn't talk about washing your garments. Just as you come into the house, you become tummy. There's another pasuk over there that says, V'ha'oichel b'bayis. Whoever eats in the house that has a negav tzaras, Yichabit says Bagadav, he has to wash his garments. So why over here does it talk about washing the garments? So in the Gemara elsewhere explains, it doesn't really mean that you eat in the house. It means if you stayed in the house the amount of time that it would take to eat, even if you didn't eat, and we know that it doesn't mean about eating, because the end of that pasuk says, whoever sleeps in the house will also have to wash his garments. So it means to say that your garments become tummy that you're wearing, specifically if you waited the amount of time that it takes to eat. So Ditnan, we learned the Mishnah Masechtas Nagayim that says as follows: if someone goes into a house that has a negav tzaras, now and here it depends, interestingly, how his clothing is coming in. If he's not wearing his garments, he's rather has his garments on his shoulder, and his shoes, his sandals, and his ring is not on his finger; it's in his hand. So he's carrying his clothing, not like the way it's worn. So that's not considered begadav. It's not considered his garments. So hu ve'hein tamein miyad. Him and the garments actually become tummy right away, because they are also what's called the habal abayis. Whatever comes into the house becomes tummy right away, like the first person we mentioned. But hayalavish kelev, if he's wearing his clothing, v'sandala b'raglam, and his sandals were on his feet, his ring was on his finger, and therefore it's his begadim, he's wearing them. Then who tamei miyadi becomes tummy right away, like the first pasuk. You come into the house of the neged tzras, you become tummy. But they ain't turn; they're going to remain tar until they delay, they tarry. B'chtei achilas pras, the amount of time that it takes to eat a half of a loaf. Meaning, generally, the Chacham said a loaf of bread is the amount of food that you could eat in 2 meals. So when we say what's called a pras is a half of a loaf. Therefore, when we talk about what's called b'chtei achilas pras, we mean the amount of time it takes to eat 1 meal's worth of food, which was a half of a Talmudic loaf. A Talmudic loaf was 2 meals worth, half of the loaf is 1 meal's worth. So therefore, the Mishnah tells us that if you wait the amount of time, so now it's considered va'oichel b'bayis, that you waited the amount of time it takes to eat what? 1 meal's worth, which is achilas pras. Now that ton we learned in the Braisa, that's what the Bach adds on that word, that there's 3 qualifications for this halacha, and one of them is pas chitin. It's wheat bread. So you see that the halacha of chita is specifically a halacha regarding your begadim becoming tummy in a house that has a negav tzaras. Now the reason why it's specifically wheat bread is because it's easier to go down wheat bread than barley bread, let's say. And so therefore, we're talking about wheat bread, not barley bread. Also, mesa, we're talking about where the person is reclining, where a person could eat it quicker, where he's not just moving around, he's in one place and he's reclining. But eichel and belifton, and he's eating it with condiment, meaning all those 3 ingredients are things that make it's a quicker amount. Wheat bread, reclining, with condiment, with like dip, whatever it is, it makes it easy to go down. If you stayed that amount of time, then the begadim on you are going to be considered va'oichel b'bayis, the amount of time of eating. So one thing we see is that the chita is a measurement in halacha of the garments becoming tummy. It's achilas pras of a bread not of a barley bread, let's say. Now, so where do we find halacha regarding barley? It's not like we learn the Mishnah Masechtas Alis. It says that etzem, a bone of a dead person, kisa'ira, like a barley kernel, is metame, it imparts tuma, b'magam if someone touches it or carries it, mein metam ba'oil, does not transmit tuma in oil. These are halacha mesinas, but one thing we find is that the barley kernel is a halacha regarding the size of a bone of a dead person being metame. Then geffen, where do we find halacha regarding a grape? Is kadei revius yain. It's the amount of that would displace a revius of wine, a revius a lug of wine, le nazir, for regarding the laws of a nazir, which is, if let's say a nazir, which is someone who made it forbidden that he's not going to take of anything related to grapes and wine, if he eats the grape solids, and it's the amount that would displace revius of wine, so he's chayiv for eating the measurement, because the measurement of a revius of wine is not the same as a revius of water. The reason for that is because wine is thick, water is more liquidy. And therefore, in a revius of wine, you can have more content than you would have in a revius of water. Like the Gemara says in Shabbos, Daf Zayin Manal, by revius of dam, when it congeals, it actually turns into a solid of an olive size because it's thick. But something that's liquidy, that's more thin, like water, if you congeal, that you turn into ice, it would not be a shiur of kazayas. So it's saying that the halacha of a nazir eating solids is specifically would displace, meaning displace you put into a bowl and it makes the water come out, only specifically of wine, which is more than that of water. And that's what we're saying, that you see that the geffen is halacha of the geffen itself. That would be a halacha of eating the grapes of seeds and pits and the shoots of the grapevine is halacha relating to that of geffen. Now, teina of figs, where do we find that? This is actually the halacha, when there's a prohibition about carrying in the street, it's kegregris. It's like the shiur of a dried fig, like tzah Shabbos, for carrying on Shabbos, like a Mishnah teaches in Masechtas Shabbos, Dayayin Vav Manalev, taking out food items the size of a gregris, which is a dried fig. So you see, fig is relating to halacha of haitzah and Shabbos, of carrying. Remind the pomegranates, not like Mishnah Masechtas Kalim. The Mishnah is discussing regarding what considers it not a kli anymore. A kli is makabel tumah. When you break it, it's not a kli anymore. So as Taisa explains, here we're talking about regarding a wooden vessel. What's the halacha? It's called kli bali batim. When you have a vessel, a bowl of a homeowner, where, as we continue to base, shiur and kirimayim, the measurement is, if it develops a hole the size of a pomegranate, which is a pretty big hole, then it's not considered a vessel anymore, and it's tahar. Now the reason is because a regular homeowner is they're concerned for their vessels. So let's say it develops a hole the size of a legume of kidneys. So you'd say, okay, let's use it for something that's a larger size, that's that of olives. If it develops a hole the size of an olive, you'll use it for something that you can use for nuts. If it develops a hole the size of a nut, you'll use it for things that are large the size of a pomegranate. The size of a pomegranate, that's already a huge hole, then you're going to throw it away, then it's already considered not a clean anymore. Now that's specifically Bali Batam, a homeowner, because a craftsman who is going to sell it, it wouldn't be the measurement of that, it would be much smaller. You can't use something with such a big hole, it's a faulty merchandise. But for a balabayas, the shiur is, if it develops a hole the size of a rimain, then it's not going to be considered clean anymore. You see again, rimain, one of the shivas aminim, has a halacha. When it says in the pasuk, Eretz Zay Yeshem, in a land that has olive oil, which refers to the olive, so Rabbi Yisrael Chanina says, yes, it's Eretz, it's a land, meaning the Jewish people, shekol shiur kazesim, all its measurements are like the size of an olive. Which the Gemara jumps in and asks, kol shiur, so do you really think that it means all the measurements? You just mentioned all the chita, sa'ira, that are different measurements that are not the size of an olive. Says the Gemara, no, Ella, rather what we mean, and this is actually the halacha, Eretz Shirayv Shirah Kazesim. We're talking about a land that most of its measurements are the size of an olive, meaning if someone eats forbidden fats, blood, leftover karbanas, pigel that had the pad kavana, you see almost everything we have is, kazayas. That's what we see, a shiur of that of an olive. And the last one of the shibas aminim, it says, devash, honey, when I mentioned the Torah honey, means the honey of dates. So therefore, that's the same thing as what we're about going to mention, keseves, which is a date. Keseves, I guess, is actually the halacha also. If someone eats a fat date, or the measurement of a fat date, by Yom Kippurim, if that's considered a violation of inui, of affliction on Yom Kippurim, if you eat the size of a fat date, that's what is considered the violation, or the shiur of that. And therefore you see that that's what are we talking about, the Shivas Aminim? It's talking about the praise of Eretz Yisrael, that every single one of it's praised has a halacha regarding shiurim in the Torah. Now, but the other opinion, Rabbi Yitzchak, remember he said in the pasuk, the reason why it says the Shivas Aminim is to tell you which one comes first. Now, Rav Chanan, we said, no, it doesn't interpret like that. He says, no, we don't care which one comes first. It's just talking about the praise of Eretz Yisrael, that it's regarding shiurim. So Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, Hani shiurim, these measurements, what Behedya Miksivi, does it say explicitly in the Torah, these measurements? No, Elamid Rabbanan, the rabbinic, B'kras Macht Ba'alma, the pasuk is just an allusion. In other words, he holds the pasuk is being mentioned, like we said, to say what comes first. oh, what do you mean? It's not coming to say first, it's coming to say regarding shiurim. He says, it doesn't say anything about the shiurim. It's rabbinic. The pasuk maybe is allusion to that, but again, he says the pasuk is to say, lahaktim, what comes first, and therefore that's the source of the other opinion who says that the machlekes in our Mishnah wasn't even if just the brachas are the same. Even the brachas are different brachas. So what's the machlekes? You're going to make a bracha on both anyway? It's to say lahaktim, which one comes first, as we rule that there is an order what comes first. Now, actually, the Gemara brings an interesting story regarding this halacha about the order of what comes first. Rav Chizr Rav Nuna, Habayasa Besudas, they were sitting by a meal, and Aisulu Kamei with Tami V'Rimoni, and they brought in front of them dates and pomegranates. So Shaku Rav Nuna took, and Baruch Atami Bereshi made a bracha on the dates first. So Amalei Rav Chizr said to him, Le'svir le'mar lahadam Rav Yosef, don't you hold to what we just mentioned previously in the Gemara, or in some Sebitem it was Rabbi Yitzchak that says Kalamakdim b'pasik zeh, whatever comes earlier in this pasuk, Kaiden l'bracha comes first. Now what came first in the bracha, in the pasuk? Rimain or dates? Dates is the last thing mentioned. Davash is tamarim, is dates. So how can you make a bracha on tamarim before Rimain when Rimain was mentioned first in the pasuk? So interesting halacha, he tells him, Amalei, he says to him, Zeh, Devash, which is the tamarim, is sheni la'aretz, is second to the word aretz, meaning it says eretz zayish shemen devash at the end of the pasuk. There is another eretz mentioned. So although it started off eretz chitzas aretz gefen tein the rimoin, eretz zayish shemen udevash. So mentioned the word eretz a second time. So it starts a new order. So actually this is halacha. It makes the olives and the dates more chashiv than pomegranates. Why? Because the pomegranate was chamishi la'aretz. It was number 5 of the order from the word eretz. So honey was number 2 from the word eretz because it was written at the end of the pasuk. So although it's number 7, but it's number 2 from the word eretz, and therefore that comes before, and that's actually the halacha, then number 5 from the first eretz, where Taisa points out, but let's say you have something that has both, it's number 1 for the eretz. Let's say you have chita and zayis, so so'orim and tamarim, where both of them are equal from eretz, you're going to use the first ones because ultimately it's early in the pasuk, and therefore you're going to make the bracha on the first one. Yeah.
So you're going to say Baruch and then Baruch.
So it's actually much discussion in the Paiskim. What do you do if you eat it in its raw state? But we could even be if it was cooked. Point is, you have something that it could be Bayim in Mezainis, chita, right? If you cook it, it's going to be Bayim in Mezainis.
Mezainis comes first, but if it's cooked, if it's still Adomo, how are you going to do that first?
If it's with what? Let's say with an olive?
Yes, because any other of the 5 species are weights. Chita is oiro are Adomo.
Right.
So you always have to say Ha'etz before Adomo.
Right, so that's a good question. The Paisim do talk about this, and it depends. It depends if we say what's better, Shabbos Aminim, or the more specific bracha, because we see in Taisus doesn't consider Ha'etz that much better than Hadama. Although we see that it's better than Shahakal, it's a good question. It's a very good. These are a lot of halachas related over here. But in the basic halacha, we're saying that what comes first is, and Taisus could be Lishitasa, that what comes first is the early one, the Shabbos Aminim, then the later one. Now, on that, Amalei, he responded to me, he says, Man Yov Lon Nagri the Parsley. He says, who can give us iron feet, v'nash minach, and that we could attend to you because we want to constantly follow you. We hear such great sagacious wisdom from you. If only we could follow you, we have iron feet that we will never get tired, always follow you around because that's such a beautiful insight. I thought what comes first is the early one, the pasuk. We find that actually the later one, because it's number 2 from Eretz, that actually comes first. Now, the Gemara continues in a related discussion. We just mentioned that regarding when you have 2 different types, that one bracha is not going to exempt the other one. Now, in the related discussion we have when it comes regarding bread, regarding a meal, Itma, we learned as follows. Let's say they brought in front of them figs and grapes, but in the middle of a meal, not, as Rashi points out, to be lalafis. The word lalafis means to eat together, to accompany the bread. Because if it was to accompany the bread, it would be a secondary. And then no one would disagree that it doesn't require bracha, not before you eat the fruit and not afterwards. Rather, we're talking about you're not eating the fruit as part of the meal. Rather, you're eating it as some type of a dessert, to sweeten your mouth in the middle of the meal when you're eating peiros. Here we have a machlekes, what's the halacha? And actually, that's why in halacha, a lot of people, when they're not sure what to do, they eat it with bread. You eat the bread, you start eating with the bread, you eat the bread at the end, and that's like the halacha, because if it's lalafis apas, if it's coming to eat with the bread, so everyone's going to agree you don't make a bracha, rishayin, achrein, that's considered tafel. Here we're talking about you eating the fruits itself, a standalone cocktail. So Amr Avhundi says, Tu'unim bracha lefneim. You have to make a bracha on the fruit beforehand because it's not secondary to the bread. You're not eating with the bread. But ve'in tu'unim bracha lachreim. It does not require bracha afterwards because berachas hamazon is going to exempt the fruits. That's one opinion. Rav Nachman says, tu'unim bracha lefneim. You have to make a bracha before you eat the fruits. But ve'in tu'unim bracha lachreim. You don't have to make a bracha after you eat the fruits. Now, Rav Sheshes Shama, he disagrees. Opinion number 2. He says, no, two in the bracha, you need to make a bracha on the fruits, bein lafneim, bein lachreim. Both before, because like we said, it's not a tafel, it's not secondary, it's not eaten with the bread. And also afterwards. Why? Because he says the Beruchas Daf is only going to exempt something that is hazan es hakol, that sustains. These fruits are not things that sustain, it's fruits. Fruit are not considered a mili dizan. It's not considered something that sustains. So therefore, you can make a bracha rishayna and achrayna on the fruits. And he says, because she'en lecha davar shetoin bracha lefanam, you don't have, like the first opinion said, to have something that you need a bracha beforehand, a bracha rishayna. Vein tan bracha la'achar, that you don't have to have a bracha achrayna, like Rav Huna said regarding when you have fruits in the meal. He says, no, you can't say that, because there's only one thing that has that halacha. Ela pas, it's only talking about bread, haba bekisnin, which comes with kisnin. Now, there's a huge machlekes rishonim, and it's a huge practical halacha l'maisa. We're going to go with Rashi's opinion, that meaning he said that you would bring after eating and after benching, which Taisa disagrees and says no, it has to be talking about that you have it in the meal before benching, because he says, and this actually we rule like Taisa's, you can't have anything that requires a bracha achrayna, that Beruchas Hamazon is you can't say that it's going to be exempted from Beruchas Hamazon if you're eating it afterwards. He says that we're talking about if you ate the shibas haminim, this pasabal bekisnin, the chamishas mini dagan. He says that you would require bracha achrayna, what's called a ala michya. Rashi goes differently than Taisus, and he says that we're talking about after eating, after Beruchas Hamazon, what they used to do is they would bring kisnin. What's kisnin? Kisnin, Rashi explains, are koloyas, are toasted grain. The reason why they would do that is because it's good for the heart, as the Gemara says elsewhere, like in Erevin Chavtes Mabeis, these kisni, which is roasted grain, is good for the heart. So they would bring with them pas habo bekisnin, means to say there was bread that came with the roasted grain that was kneaded with types of spices, which Rashi says is like type of obelish, which is type of like a thick type of a dough. They would make from them certain types of forms. They would make in shapes of birds and shapes of trees, and they would eat from it just a little bit. And now Mefarshim are very busy with Rashi. Rashi seems to be a conglomerate of all the different opinions in Pasabah B'Kisnin. Because one interpretation of Pasabah B'Kisnin is from the word kiss, which is that you have types of spices inside that starch food. Or it means to say if most of the dough is made with, let's say, fruit juices. Or a third interpretation of the Rishonim is if it's just dry and thin, like a pretzel type of a thing. Rashi seems to put, in the Mefarshim are busy, they don't know what Rashi's interpretation is like the rest of Rishonim, but it's something like this type of a dessert where you eat very little of it. Now, since you put in a lot of spices and you put a lot of nuts and almonds into the side of it, and you eat very little, so the Chazal did not require a bracha achrayna of an ala mirkia. Just like we find, Rashi compares it to rice bread and millet bread, which the Gemara said previously, that first you make a bayir min mezainis, but at the end is v'loy klum. Now, v'loy klum, what does that mean over there regarding rice? It means you don't make a ala mechi, you can make a bayir nefashis. But here there's a discussion in Rashi and in the Gemara, if you're going to even make a bracha afterwards, are we talking about, because according to Rashi, it's after Beruchas Hamazon. So would you make a bayir nefashis? But one thing is, at least that this opinion, it's not even the main part of the sugya. But it comes in, so everyone discusses over here, what do you do with Pasabah B'Kisnin, because it's also very practical halacha. But the point is, he's saying that, no, I disagree with you regarding fruits. You're telling me by fruits, you're going to make a bracha rishayna, and no bracha achrayna. I disagree with you. By fruits come in the middle of the meal, you make a bracha rishayna and a bracha achrayna. He says, because there's nothing that has a bracha rishayna and not a bracha achrayna, by a meal or not by a meal, which my first are busy. The only exception is Pasabah B'Kisnin bulva. Only Pasabah B'Kisnin, which is something that you eat very little of it. It's that you're only going to make a bracha rishayna of a mezainis, and you're not going to make a bracha achrayna. With the Amar Farshim that say in Rashi actually that there's no, even not during meal, it's after Beruchas Hamazon, after the meal. It doesn't make a difference. You don't make a bracha achrayna, you eat very little of it. So that's the only thing. But regarding fruits in the meal, you'll make a bracha rishayna and the bracha achrayna. Now, says the Gemara, these two opinions, Upliga, they both disagree with Reb Chia. That's a third interpretation. He says actually you don't make a bracha at all on the fruits. Because Reb Chia, he says, pas, bread, paiteres kol minei meichel, exempts all types of food, whether bracha rishayna or bracha achrayna. The yain, so too, this is actually interesting halacha that regarding wine is the same thing. Regarding, just like in food items, bread, wine, paiter kol minei mashkim. If you make a bracha on wine, it actually exempts all the other liquids, all the other beverages you're going to drink. It exempts that bracha. Now, so therefore he disagrees with both of them. He says regarding the fruits, you don't make a bracha rishayna or bracha achrayna. So we have one opinion that says you make a bracha rishayna and no bracha achrayna. We have one that says no, you make a bracha rishayna and bracha achrayna. We have a third opinion that says no, you don't make a bracha rishayna and you don't make a bracha achrayna. So Amar Papi says hilchas halachas as follows. Dvarim haboy machmasud, and this is actually as we rule. Things that come because of the meal mean to say that they are being used what's called lalaf es sapas, to be a condiment for the bread. Now the Reed disagrees, and we rule like Taisus. He says that No, things that come because of the meal, meaning that you usually eat it with bread, like meat and fish and all types of cooked dishes, and then you bring it b'teich hasuda in middle of the meal, so ain't tuna bracha. So then that does not require bracha because it's considered secondary. And therefore anything, whether it's a sustenance type of food or a food type of thing, but if it's coming to eat with the bread, it doesn't require bracha. Loy lefneim v'loy lachreim. And that's actually, as we rule, you don't have to make a bracha rishayna or a bracha achrayna, even if, and Tosfos points this out, even if you eat in the meal by itself without the bread. Because since it normally comes because of the bread, meaning when you sit for a bread meal, you eat it with the meat, with the meal, even if you're not eating it now, you're eating the meat separately, the bread is going to exempt it. So you're not going to make a bracha rishayna or achrayna. That's if it comes because of the meal. But let's say, let's say it's not coming because of the meal. For example, porridge or cabbage or beets, which they're not lifton, the way Rashi learns it. They don't come with the bread. You eat it, it's an independent meal. And it comes to satiate. But it's coming b'teichas through the middle of a bread meal. So then says the Gemara, tuna bracha lefneim, it requires a bracha beforehand, which we don't rule like Rashi on this, the way he's interpreting the Gemara, because Rashi says it's not secondary. It's not coming because of the bread that the bracha l'mitzi should exempt it. You're eating it for its own right. So therefore, according to that interpretation, Rav Papa says it requires a bracha rishayna, but the ain't tuna bracha lachreim. It does not require bracha afterwards, because ultimately these are things that are mazon, they're sustenance, and therefore berachas hamazon, the bracha of the sustenance will exempt it. Now, whereas, continues the Gemara, Rashi's Girsa has the words Divarim Haragin Lavai, but let's say things that normally come La'achar Suda, that you normally come after the meal, like fruit, which is actually the halacha. Even if you bring it in middle of the meal, but it's not coming to be eaten with the bread, you eat it independent of fruit, then tuna bracha, then require bracha, and we rule like this, Bein Lefneim, whether beforehand, because it's not considered secondary, but we don't rule like the next part, but that's what Rav Papa is saying, and Bein Lachreim, even afterwards. Because Birchas HaMasan doesn't exempt the fruit because it's not called mezayne. And this is essentially the same thing like Rav Shesh's opinion that in regarding to qualifying this halacha, regarding that you make a bracha rishayna, but you're not going to make a bracha achrayna. But he says like Rav Shesh that actually, meaning we rule like Rav Nachman, but he says like Rav Shesh that you require bracha rishayna and a bracha achrayna. Now, to conclude the Gemara brings the story that Shalu has Ben Zayma. They asked Ben Zayma, why did they say the things that become because of the meal, meaning they're as a result of the meal, because you're eating because of the bread. B'teichas through the middle of the meal, into the bracha does not require bracha. Lo lefneim v'lo lachreim. You don't have to make a bracha on whatever you're eating in the middle of the meal, not a bracha rishayna, bracha achrayna. So let me say to them, how you pass by trusting, because bread exempts it's tuffle. It's part of the bread. Now, Ihachi asked him, Yain nami nifteri pas. Then when you drink wine in the middle of the meal, why do you make a bracha by pragafen? And that's the halacha, why he does not exempt it with the bread. So the Gemara answered, Ben Zayma said, Shani Yain, wine is different, as we continue to have a membezim at Aleph, the goyim bracha la'atzmai, because we find many places that wine causes it's a bracha to be made on it independently. Even if you're not coming to drink and you don't want to drink, you make for kiddush, you make havdalah, you make by a chasna, you take a cup of wine, you make a bracha. We see it has its own independent chashivas, and therefore it's not going to be tuffle, it's not going to be secondary to the bread, but everything else is a tuffle to the bread. So some ideas we spoke about in today's daf, Beruchas Daf Mem Aleph, was we had a machlekes in the Mishnah. What's better to make a bracha on? You have a bunch of different foods inside in front of you. Do you make on one of the shivas aminim, or do you make on what's chaviv, what's dear to you? Now, in that machlekes Tanaim, we had a machlekes Amayram. What was the machlekes talking about? One Amayra, which were two Amayram, Ula and another one of the Amayram, he said it's only when the brachas are the same, like when you have an apple and you have an olive. So that was the question, what should you make your bracha on? But if, let's say, they're different brachas, what's the difference? Chayzim avarach. If you have a radish and you have an olive, who cares? You can make both brachas anyways. What does that mean? There's a machlekes. You can't have a machlekes. You can make both brachas anyways. Oh, what's with the brayse that says you can make the bracha on the radish and exempt the zayis? That we explained this to when the radish was the primary. You're coming to eat the radish, and the olive is just to take away the sharpness of the olive, of the radish, then you can make a bracha on it. But when they're both different brachas, there's no machlekes. It doesn't make a difference. You can make both brachas anyways. Only when you're coming to exempt. You're making one bracha. Which one should you make on? Should this one or this one? You're going to hold one. You're supposed to hold it when you make the bracha. Which one? So then that's where we have the machlekes. Is it the one that's shivas aminim or the one that's chaviv? But if they're different brachas, no machlekes. But we had another amar that said that no, even when the brachas are not the same. So what's the machlekes? You can make both brachas. Yeah, but which one comes first? Like we find in the pasuk of the shivas aminim that when they're in there's an order chita sari gefen teinarim and shemen zayis dvash, that the pasuk, why does it go through it to tell you that if you have a choice to eat wheat or barley, you can make a bracha on the wheat, not the barley. If you have grapes and you have wheat, wine might be different, but you have grapes, and then you can make the bracha on wheat first because it's early in the pasuk. That's why it says the Shabbos Aminim, and then for sure, if one of them is not the Shabbos Aminim, that's where Yehuda says, as we rule, you make it the Shabbos Aminim. Chacham said no, chav v'zadav, but that the machlekes could even be even when the brachas are not the same, but which one comes first? And interesting halacha, we said that the dates will come before the pomegranate because although it's number 7 and this is number 5, but it's number 2 from the word eretz and this is number 5 from the word eretz. Now the Gemara pointed out that interpretation of the pasuk of Shabbos Aminim that's coming to tell you which one comes first is not like Reb Chanan. So this opinion could be like Reb Chanan, which is it's not talking about the praise of the Peiros. It's talking about the praise of Eretz Yisrael. What's the praise of Eretz Yisrael? That every single one of the Shabbos Aminim has a shiur of halacha related to it. Why? By wheat, we said, if let's say the tumah of someone's garments, when he's wearing it, when he's going into a house that has a negav tzaras, it's if you delayed the amount of time of eating kedei achilas pras, what's a half of a loaf of a bread, which is 1 meal's worth of wheat bread. So you see, there's halacha of chita related to halacha. Sa'ira barley is when you have a bone of a dead person the size of a barley corn. That is metame b'magav masa. It's a halacha related to sa'ira. Geffen is a shiur of revi, specifically of yayin, not of water, which is thicker. For eating things that are prohibited for a nazir, you see a halacha related to geffen, which is yayin. Then halacha of te'ena is a gregoris, which is a dried fig, which is what a te'ena is, for haitzah, for carrying out of Rishas Hayachat to Rishas Ram on Shabbos. A remind, where do you find that in halacha? If you have a hole the size of a pomegranate in the kli of a bali batim, it's not a kli anymore, it's tahar. That's specifically the size of a pomegranate. When it says in the pasuk Eretz Zeh Yishem, in the land that has olive oil, but it's talking about the one of Zayis, it's coming to that most of the measurements of that land is a kazayis. And when it says devash, which means a tamarim, which is dates, which that's where the honey is coming from, that's kekesevas agasa, a large date on Yom Kippurim, that's a measurement halacha. So that's why it's talking about, but not to say what comes first. And therefore, that's the two different interpretations, which is the two interpretations of these Amiram regarding is the machlekes when the brachas are the same or even when they're not the same. Then Amid Beis, we got into a large discussion, which is very complex. As I said it, I realized that how complex it's sounding because there's Rashi and there's Taisus, and we rule one way, and we have them many times when we learn the sugya. We're so confused because Rashi has his opinion. He's a Rishon and he's also a Paisig, a Mefarish, and we rule sometimes differently, so it sounds a little bit confusing. What's the halacha? Because we don't always rule like Rashi. But generally, we're going to go with the interpretation of Rashi. We said that if you bring in fruits, not because of the meal, meaning it's not, if it's eaten with bread, everyone agrees the bread is going to exempt it. And that's actually the halacha. You eat it with bread, and let's say you don't know if you make a bracha or not. You see a guy eating his ice cream with bread. What's he doing? It's not because he likes bread with ice cream. It's just he doesn't know. Am I making a bracha? I'm not making a bracha. So you eat it with bread, it's going to be considered secondary. But let's say it's not coming because of the bread. You're eating the fruits independent in the meal. We have a three-way machlekes. What do? One opinion says you have to make a bracha beforehand. Why? It's not a tuffle to the bread. Why don't you make a bracha on it? Why would you not make a bracha on it? It's not secondary to the bread. Bread is eaten separate. The guy's eating fruit, happens to be eating in the middle of a meal. So you make a bracha rishon, but not a bracha achrona, because Beruchas Hamazon is going to exempt everything inside of it. Second opinion says no. It says it needs a bracha beforehand, yeah, because it's not a tafel, and a bracha afterwards. What, Beruchas Hamazon not going to exempt the fruit? No. Beruchas Hamazon is only Beruchas Hamazon hazones hakol. Fruits are not considered zan. It's not like a food staple. So yeah, bracha rishon you have to make, and the bracha achrona. And he says your halacha of making a bracha before and not afterwards, which again, it was complex, but I will say just like Rashi says it, is only by pasa babakisnin. Pasa babakisnin, whatever that means, whether it's because it's made with fruit juices or because there's nuts and spices inside of it, or because it's a thin type of a dough, which are all those three different types of rishonim in the interpretation halacha, and Rashi seems to be a conglomerate of all those different things. That's the only thing you'll make a bracha rishona of a mezainis, and you won't make a bracha achrona of alamechia. Does that mean you won't make any bracha achrona at all, or burn the fashis, whatever it is? But that's the only time you'll have such a case. But fruit in the middle of a meal? No, you make a bracha rishon and a bracha achrona. The third opinion says, no, you guys got it all wrong. You don't make a bracha rishon or bracha achrona. Because pas trumps everything. You make a bracha on bread, everything's included. You don't have to make a bracha rishona, and Beruchas Hamazon will exempt everything. You don't have to make a bracha achrona. Just like, and we don't rule totally like that. So therefore, we didn't say that when we said it, like halacha, because it's not true. We do make a bracha on fruits in the middle of a meal, but we won't make a bracha achrona. But he says, but with this part, actually, we do rule like him, although Tais wants to say we don't, because you see we don't rule like him over here, but we do. When you make a bracha on wine, it will include all liquids, all beverages inside. You buy a kiddush, you make a bracha on a cup of wine, you don't make a bracha on that beer that you're about to drink, or whatever it is, because it's including the bracha of the wine. But although even this opinion says bread exempts everything, there's one exception. Wine's not going to be included because it's gorim bracha l'asman. You make kiddush, you make abdullah, you make a bayachas, and you make a wine. That's going to be the one exception that even though you have a bread meal, you will, and we rule like this, you'll have to make a bracha by a paragafen on that wine. Now, just secondary, like we mentioned, if it's coming because of the meal, what's called lalafis, you don't need a bracha according to everyone because it's considered secondary to the bread, eating it with the bread. If it's not lalafis, our Gemara, the way Rashi translates it, like for example, porridge or cabbage, it's its own staple, so it's not eaten with the bread, you would require bracha beforehand. Again, we don't rule like this, we rule like Taisus that says that no, you wouldn't have to make a bracha, but a bracha achreina for, let's say, the porridge and the cabbage, you wouldn't have to make a bracha because birchas hamazain, something that's a mazon, not like fruit. According to our Gemara, by the fruits, could be birchas hamazon does not exempt. But by these things which are mazon, then you would exempt because it's considered a staple, and therefore birchas hamazon would exempt it. Thank you, Torah, anytime for hosting us.
Go ahead.